Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today I'm going to start off by thanking you for watching my videos. This allows me to grow my channel, and I know that you are actually offering me your most valuable asset, which is your time. So thank you for that. I'm hoping I'm not wasting your time by presenting this car in my own fashion. But today we are next to the brand new Volvo XC60, and I know some of you are wondering right now, well, isn't that the old model? Well, to be fair, yes, this is the old XC60, but it received a mild, very mild facelift. Why was it just very mild? Because this is Volvo's current best-selling car, and it was only launched in 2017, and yet in this very short period of time it managed to become the best-selling model in the Swedish car manufacturers range. 2024 was a record year for this car, and most likely Volvo decided that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they applied just very small tweaks to this car to keep it going for I don't know how many years. This is, yes, their best-selling car because I'm guessing it has the best price to performance to quality ratio. We're going to talk about that later on because this is quite an expensive model, but it is at the same time the most powerful plug-in hybrid. It has every single bell and whistle on, so yeah, it's going to cost a pretty penny. So what is a Volvo XC60? If you've been living under a rock for the past 7 or 8 years, you probably don't know that this is Volvo's entry in the D segment. So this is a car that's rivaling cars like the BMW X3, the Audi Q5, the Mercedes-Benz GLC, or the Lexus NX. And unlike most of its rivals, I think all of the rivals I just mentioned, this is now the oldest model in this segment, right? Yes, it did receive a facelift, but the platform itself is the oldest in between all of those aforementioned. So yes, this is getting a bit long in the tooth. However, I think it's still quite relevant. The design of this car was unveiled basically in 2015 when the XC90 was unveiled as well, and I think it held up pretty well to the test of time. Unlike its bigger brother, which also received a facelift this year, the Thor's hammer in design in the headlamps hasn't been changed on this car. The XC90 did receive a change in that regard. But we do have a new front grille, a new front bumper, right? So that tells you this is a facelift. Also around the back, we also have a new set of taillights that look exactly the same as the old ones, but have a bigger contrast. They are a bit tinted, right? What other things changed on this car? Well, we do have a new set of colors. We have this Forest Lake green color. We have another shade of silver, and for the first time ever, you can order mulberry red, which was a color reserved for the XC90. You can order it on the new XC60. We do also get a couple of new designs for the wheels. We do have the biggest wheels on this car right here, 21-inch. And we're going to talk about those later on. I wouldn't get them, to be honest. Even with the air suspension this car has on, I probably would skip on the 21-inch wheels. Around the back, we also have a new bumper. That looks pretty good in my book, and that's about it. Now, if we're talking about configuring one of these cars, you will probably notice that there are two main roads you can go down on, right? So you can have the bright theme applied to the car, which means every trim on it is in chrome, or you can have the dark theme, which we also have on this car, which makes everything black. So you'll notice that the front grille is black, you know, the trims around the windows are black, the longitudinal bars and the mirror caps, everything is black on this car. If it comes to the equipment lines, you have the Core, Plus and Ultra. Those are the three choices you have in your range, and that's about it. But then again, depending on the market you're in, some of those choices are not available. For example, in most markets, if you want to go for a plug-in hybrid, you can only choose between Plus and Ultra as the equipment lines. If you go for the mild hybrid B5 model, you can also get the core version. But we're going to talk about that later on. And I also like the fact that the doors cover the door sills and the sound they make when you open and close them. They have a very deep sound to them. Let's pop the hood and talk about what's hiding under there. So what's hiding under the hood of the new XC60? Well, basically the same powertrains you had on the older model, except that now Volvo dropped the diesel options completely. So basically what you get is a mild hybrid under the code name B5 using a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine under the hood, 250 horsepower. Then there's the T6, which uses the exact same internal combustion engine, but is also helped out by an electric motor on the rear axle and has a total output of 350 horsepower. And then there's this car, which is the T8, which has 455 horsepower. And it uses a 2-liter engine under the hood, but with a couple of different things on it. So when the XC60 first came out with the T8 name on it, it used a 2-liter engine under the hood that had also both a turbocharger and a supercharger. These days though, the recipe has changed a bit and we have a turbocharger and we have an electric compressor for a better response and less parasitic losses in the drivetrain, right? So that's what we have here. The engine alone delivers 310 horsepower and up to 400 Newton meters of torque. It is a direct injection engine, so carbon buildup might be an issue later down the road. It has a timing belt, which needs to be changed every 10 years. That probably won't be an issue for most owners. It's transversely mounted and it only powers the front wheels through an 8-speed AC gearbox, which is a Toyota sourced gearbox. It's a torque converter. This engine, as I said, powers the front wheels alone, but this is an all-wheel drive car. How does that work? Well, we have an electric motor on the rear axle, which powers those wheels alone. It develops 145 horsepower and 309 Newton meters of torque. So that's how you get the total sum of 455 horsepower and 709 Newton meters of torque on this car. In between the front and the rear axle, in the transmission tunnel, which is empty because we don't have a drive shaft in there, you have a set of batteries. Now, word on the street was that for the facelift, Volvo would use bigger batteries, but the problem is they probably couldn't get them to fit and they didn't have a higher density setup. So we still have the same capacity as the old ones. So we're talking about 18.8 kilowatt hours in total and a usable capacity of almost 15 kilowatt hours. And Volvo says that should give this car an electric range of close to 70 kilometers, but I didn't really get that number. We're going to talk about how much I got later on. Charging them is done using this port over here at up to 6.4 kilowatts. Now that's where you actually see that this platform is getting a bit old in the tooth, because most of the rivals this car has have batteries well over 20 kilowatt hours usable, and they have higher charging powers, right? For example, on all Mercedes plug-in hybrid models, you get up to 60 kilowatts of charging power using a CCS port. Now that's almost 10 times more than on the Volvo. At the same time, if we're talking about plug-in hybrids, you don't really need fast charging because they are meant to be used by charging them at home or at work, you know, to facilitate your daily commute being on electrons alone. So you don't really need fast charging. Fast charging is useful on longer trips on electric cars, but not on plug-in hybrids. Okay, so that said, what else should I mention? Yeah, we have independent suspension front and back, and on this car we do have a pneumatic setup, an air suspension, but this is an option even on the most expensive T8 version like the one we have here. 0 to 100 kilometers an hour is done in 4.9 seconds, and this is a ludicrously tall hood to pull on whenever you're done with the car. Right, yeah, so that's about it. So let's talk about the interior, starting with the boot. Now, since this is a plug-in hybrid, you do lose some space, but not as much as you would on other cars. As I said, the batteries are in the transmission tunnel, so they don't take up a lot of room in the boot. We have 468 liters over here. Please ignore all this trash. It was left over by the people from Volvo. These are the doors, the mats for the interior, whatever. Yeah, you do lose 15 liters of space compared to a non-plug-in hybrid car, because we have an electric motor on the rear axle, and that lifts the boot's floor a tiny bit. The loading lip is non-existent, right? So we have anchor points over here, anchor points over here, and the 60/40 splitting tailgate, which is not exactly what I expected on a premium car, but we do have a ski hatch. We are talking about a Swedish car at the end of the day. And since we have a pneumatic suspension, you have the option of raising or lowering the rear axle to fit your luggage easier inside the car. Let's take a look at the materials used inside. So I think the XC60, even though it is the oldest in this segment, has the best interior quality of all the cars in this segment. So this plastic feels really nice to the touch, this area over here as well. And we do have Nappa leather in this car. This is an option, but the base upholstery is textile, and then you have an intermediary option, which is synthetic leather. But this is Nappa leather, so yeah, you can also have that. We have 2 anchor points over here and 2 over there for a child seat, a armrest, and let's take a look at the space inside. So I'm 6 feet tall, and the driver's seat is adjusted in my comfortable driving position. This is the amount of room I am left with over here in the back, and this is the amount of headroom I have over here in the back. No issues whatsoever, and we do have a panoramic sunroof on this car as well. As for the front end of the car, nothing really changed a lot. Let's check the build quality. We have the same build quality up front as in the back, right? The same plastic used over here, the same leather. We do have these aluminum trims for the Bowers & Wilkins sound system, which look absolutely brilliant, and a lot of storage room over here. And these are the already famous Volvo seats, right, with this Volvo headrest, and the minimalist button situation over here. Basically, you're using this button to switch between controlling this extender over here, the lumbar support, or the width of the backrest. Since this is a plug-in hybrid, you do have a dedicated button over here for opening the refueling cap, because you might have some fumes over there and you need to release them before opening it. We have white wood trim over here, ash, it looks pretty good, and the same layout on the center console. Let's start the car. I do like this Orevors crystal. It's lit up and it looks really nice at night. Auto hold, of course, electronic parking brake, but we are missing the drive mode selector over here. And that's been the case for a while, not only on this facelift. They moved the wireless charger over here, which is a pretty good touch. In the past it was over here and the phone would get really heated up from the sun. And we have a new hardware and a new screen for the infotainment system. This is an 11.2-inch setup. I think it works faster than before. It uses a Snapdragon processor in the background, so yeah, it should be faster. What I don't like is the fact that they moved a couple of things, like for example the fact that we don't have the driving modes over here, we have them on the screen. So this is the default mode the car will start in, and it will use the battery for as much as possible to save fuel. Then there's power mode, which is basically sport mode on Volvo models. Pure mode, which allows you to drive on electricity alone. These two are very similar. The only difference is that when you're in pure mode and you press harder on the acceleration, the engine won't kick in. If you're in hybrid mode and you press harder on the acceleration, the engine will kick in. There's off-road mode, which basically raises the ground clearance, and there's all-wheel drive mode, which basically activates the rear electric motor at all times. There's battery usage options. Basically, auto allows the car to do its thing, hold maintains the charge level for future usage, and charge allows you to use the ICE to replenish the battery. The steering feel can be set up between soft and firm. I keep it on soft, I don't need it in firm, and you can activate or deactivate the possibility of raising and lowering the suspension whenever you get in and out of the car. You do have shortcuts for various functions over here, right? So yeah, this is basically a home button. Since this uses Android in the background as a software, you do have apps installed directly on this setup, on this infotainment system, and you do have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but they are wired. But I think they are basically useless because you already have Google Maps. It's working flawlessly. You can also install Waze. It works flawlessly, so there's no need for those options. Anyway, this is the instrument cluster, as simple as it gets. You can switch between that and this. This basically shows Google Maps in the instrument cluster. I don't really use it, and that's about it. So if we're talking about the inner city section of our review, we're talking about, first and foremost, about the electric range this car has to offer. Because that's very important if you're buying a plug-in hybrid. If you're buying a plug-in hybrid, you're probably buying it because you're planning on using it on electric power most of the time. Otherwise, if you're not charging this car and using it in electric mode, you should probably go for a pure ICE model, right? Or a mild hybrid, the B5 version. Because plug-in hybrids are meant to be used as plug-in hybrids, namely to be used charged. Otherwise, all you're doing is carrying a load of batteries around with you for no apparent reason. Yes, you do have a lot of power, but if we're talking about inner city driving, where are you going to use 455 horsepower, right? So, what range did I get with this car? Well, Volvo says you should get about 70 kilometers of range out of that 15 usable kilowatt-hour battery. I didn't get that far. I got about 55 overall, which is pretty good, considering I'm driving in one of the busiest cities in the world, not only in Europe, and it was incredibly hot out. But on this car, since it's a plug-in hybrid, the AC compressor is electric, so it's powered by electricity, not by a set of belts, and that makes it a bit more efficient. So yeah, I did cover about 55 kilometers before the ICE kicked in, which is pretty good in my book. And then up to the first 100 kilometers covered, the average fuel consumption was 5.5 liters per 100 kilometers covered. Now, if you're using this car as you're supposed to, namely charged every day, that should be your maximum fuel consumption, 5.5 liters per 100 kilometers covered. And that's pretty damn good for a car of this size with 450 horsepower, at least in my book. Now, if my math isn't wrong, that average fuel consumption means that this car would sip about 11, let's say 12 liters per 100 kilometers covered with the battery completely depleted. Which, once again, considering the size of this damn thing, isn't bad at all. I mean, to have a 455 horsepower car sipping just 10, 11, 12 liters of fuel every 100 kilometers covered is a pretty good deal. I know a lot of cars with a lot less power that don't get nearly as far in terms of MPG, right? So either way you think about it, this is a very efficient car. Now, let's talk about the way it feels when you're driving it around town. And as I mentioned before, I wouldn't get the 21-inch wheels. They ruin the ride. They do look good, but they definitely ruin the ride, even if we're talking about a car with air suspension like the one we're driving, right? So basically, you can feel that all the vibrations sent through the cabin and all the thunks and the weird noises sent inside the cabin are due to those huge wheels, because the suspension would otherwise even things out. I would probably go for the 19-inch wheels or at least 20-inch wheels for more comfort. The problem is, if you want to go for the T8, you are offered by default 21-inch wheels, so that's the size you get as standard. So you probably have to buy yourself a new set of wheels on a smaller side of things to have the best possible comfort around town. Now, other than that, no issues whatsoever. This is a very easy car to drive around town. The steering is incredibly light. As you saw, you can actually adjust how light it is. The brake pedal has a very natural feel. You know, switching between regenerative braking and mechanical braking is done very easily, so no issues whatsoever over there. We do have adaptive cruise control in this car, which works pretty great in heavy traffic like this. We do have auto hold, right? Visibility is great all around, and you can get 360 degrees cameras on this car, and it actually has a very nice resolution, right? You can see the car all around, you can see the sides if you want to, and I probably would recommend getting them because, you know, those 21-inch wheels I mentioned earlier, if you don't have the 360-degree camera system, you probably could hit the curve with them, and fixing them might be a bit more expensive than getting the 360-degree system in the first place. So I would probably get that. So yeah, it's a very serene atmosphere inside, you know, especially when you're driving electric. But I did notice a couple of things that I don't like. Things like the fact that sometimes when slowing down, the gearbox seems to be a bit uneasy. You know, pulling away does feel a bit clunky sometimes, and sometimes the car doesn't really know what gear to select. So the switch between electric power and ICE can be a bit tricky at times, and I didn't notice that before on older models. I don't know if it's something that has anything to do with the new generation, but sometimes when slowing down fast, the gearbox seems to be taken by surprise. Here we are on the highway. Let's do a quick acceleration test from 80 kilometers an hour to 130. Let me slow down. 80, let's go. 90, 100, 120, 130, some 140. Right, so you won't have any issues whatsoever in keeping up with the traffic. And mind you, right now the car is showing me that the battery is empty, so it's showing me a range of 0 kilometers, and that's something a lot of people are afraid of. They think that if the car shows you that the battery is empty, you won't have the extra 150 horsepower that electric motor on the rear axle can deliver, and that's false, because the battery on any plug-in hybrid always has a buffer at its disposal, and that buffer is used for hard accelerations, right, overtaking and stuff like that. It's a precautionary measure, if you will, to make sure that you always have the power at your disposal. And a lot of people don't really understand that you're not using the 450 horsepower this car has on paper all the time. No car uses its maximum power all the time. You only use that amount of power when you go pedal to the metal, when overtaking and stuff like that, but otherwise you're using a lot less power. And cars like this are set up to throw every residual bit of energy from the ICE under the hood back into the battery to be used later on for acceleration and stuff like that. So yeah, you won't ever run out of the 450 horsepower this car has on paper. But how does it drive on the highway? As you saw, overtaking is really easy. You can easily do that, but there are some issues as well. Fuel consumption is pretty high, so 10 liters per 100 kilometers covered. It's a bit more than I expected, but then at the end of the day, on the highway, you are relying solely on the ICE under the hood. So yes, fuel consumption will go up. And the other issue I noticed is the level of road noise. Now, as I said, I don't recommend getting the 21-inch wheels. They not only ruin the ride, but they also bring in a lot of extra noise inside the cabin, and you can actually hear the extra noise coming from under the belly of the car. The side mirrors also contribute to that. They also bring in a lot of road noise into the cabin, and I measured the amount of noise this car has at 130 kilometers an hour, and that was 78 decibels. And that's with the double glazed windows. If I didn't have double glazed windows, probably that figure would have gone up to 80, maybe 79 decibels. That's an important difference. So overall, it's not as refined on the highway as some of its rivals. It could have been better. However, you do have one of the best driving assistants around. So yeah, the car will basically drive itself on the highway, keeps you in lane, keeps you at a safe distance from the car in front of you. The LED headlamps work brilliantly. One of the best, if not the best setup in this segment. You have a very good sound system which can block out a lot of that extra road noise. So overall, I think you will be able to do a lot of miles in this car in absolute comfort and arrive at your destination quite relaxed. The fuel tank is 71 liters, so even if you're doing like 10 liters per 100 kilometers covered, you should be able to cover up to 700 kilometers with a full tank. So that should be enough for most people. Now let's pull over and try to come up with some conclusions about this car and how it compares to its rivals, pricing, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, the question remains, should you buy a Volvo XC60? Well, the answer will depend entirely on you. What I can tell you is that this car, fully optioned, has a list price of 97,000 euros. And right now you might be thinking, well, that's just way too much. Well, that depends. I tested almost all of its rivals except the Lexus NX, and I can tell you that the BMW X3 I tested was 95,000 euros. The Mercedes GLC I tested, it was the GLC 400e, also a plug-in hybrid solution, had a list price of 92,000 euros. The Audi Q5 was cheaper, but it wasn't a plug-in hybrid, it was a 2-liter diesel. So yeah, that's the price you have to pay for a fully optioned car like this in this segment these days. So no, the Volvo isn't expensive, it's just like all of its rivals. However, this is the oldest car in the segment, so maybe it should be cheaper. That's why the dealer over here is offering a 16,000 euro rebate, so you can actually buy this car for 81,000. That's a lot better compared to its competition. At the end of the day, I think the XC60 does have a crowd of its own, right? So there are fans of the brand that will buy it no matter what, because they need the safety it brings, the status it brings, you know, they love the brand, they love what it offers. And there's a reason why the XC60 is the best-selling car in Volvo's lineup right now. And that is because it offers every bit of technology the XC90 has to offer, while bringing it all together in a more compact package, right? So that means you will have less trouble parking it, less trouble maintaining it, and so on and so forth. So yes, I get the appeal, and I actually like this car. No matter how much I criticize it, I think that the customers actually interested in buying it won't really care about what I had to say bad about it. It is what it is. So yeah, this has been my review of the Volvo XC60 Facelift. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, don't forget to like, share, and of course subscribe, and don't forget to feed your passions.